Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Prayers for peace in Israel and Gaza.
Our Jewish brothers and sisters, they're feeling rage. They're feeling hate.
I think the number one word to describe today is fear.
As the deadly fighting continues. Plus, Surrey goes to court to try to keep the RCMP.
They're very concerned about the cost to Surrey taxpayers if this transition were to continue.
Well, BC's Public Safety Minister vows that transition to a city force will happen. And 50 years later,
I remember my cousin who went missing.
People in BC's Chilean community remember a violent coup.
I was with my mind in the old country and physically here.
And finding new homes here.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Members of BC's Jewish community say they are feeling fear after a former Hamas leader called for worldwide protests today to fight against Israel. But as the war between Israel and Hamas continues, local leaders are calling for peace. Our Joe Ballard joins us live near the commercial Broadway SkyTrain station, where some people have gathered tonight. Joel, you've been there for the past little while. What can you tell us?
Dan, there are hundreds of people here, I would say around 300, for a pro-Palestinian rally. And it started in front of the SkyTrain station, but it's now folded into the streets, blocking commercial. I know the march is going to be heading up to First Avenue. You can see it behind me. I'm sure you can hear it behind me. And all this comes, as you mentioned, as the war continues between Israel and Hamas. We're seeing huge casualties, and leaders here, as you mentioned earlier, are calling for peace. At the Congregation Beth Israel Synagogue, a sense of unease.
The number one word to describe today is fear.
Rabbi Infeld says he has heard from congregants who are afraid to come to the synagogue, his time spent consoling and comforting members.
The very point of a terrorist is not just to kill and to maim, but the very point of a terrorist is to bring terror and to terrify, and we cannot give in to terrorism.
Across town at the Al Jamia Mosque, a prayer for peace was held to spread a message of love.
Our Jewish brothers and sisters, they're feeling rage. They're feeling hate. They're feeling pain. We understand it. We as Muslims, we feel rage, we feel pain, we feel hate, and those emotions are there, but they won't get you anywhere.
In Israel, the military warned Palestinians to flee parts of Gaza as infantry and tanks carried out raids. Gaza authorities say more than 1,800 people have been killed in the conflict, while Israel's military says more than 1,300 people have been killed in their country. Back in Vancouver, the call for peace rings out amid the carnage.
What happened in Israel to the Israeli people is horrible. There is no excuse for it. I categorically condemn it, but you cannot put collective punishment on a people, and that's what's happening.
Vancouver's mayor urging understanding.
Make no mistake about it, Vancouver is a place of peace, love, and inclusion.
Some people calling on him to do more.
Are you going to condemn Israel, though?
We're not, look.
It's been 75 years, please.
Yeah, so look, I'm not going to get into that.
Our time is limited, and our prayers are going to start.
Back at the synagogue, Rabbi Infeld says emotions are complicated. Fear layered on top of mourning for those who have been killed.
That's true grief. And with that type of grief, there's nothing that can be said.
Vancouver police, meanwhile, are making themselves more visible at places of worship and community centers.
So right now, there's nothing that leads us to believe that there's any threats here in Vancouver. But having said that, we're taking extra precautions.
One piece of comfort for people in fear. Joel Ballard. So Dan, as you heard there, the plea is for peace. And I had a chance to speak with a rallier here who echoed those pleas.
Here to let the people, let the world know that it's a very bad situation over there. Please help the people and please stop the war, and please find a peaceful solution for this issue to be solved forever.
Chatting with the ralliers here, they're in support of Palestinians, and they're calling for the creation of a free and independent Palestinian state. Dan?
Joel Ballard live on Commercial Drive. Joel, thank you very much. A mass exodus of Palestinians from northern Gaza is now underway. They're making their way south after the Israeli army told nearly 1 million people to leave within the next 24 hours. Hamas continued to fire rockets at several Israeli cities, dismissing talk of an Israeli ground invasion as a ploy and telling people there to stay put. Israel, meanwhile, pounded Gaza with retaliatory airstrikes again today after the deadly attack by Hamas on Israel last Saturday that killed more than 1,300 people in Israel. Authorities in Gaza say the number of people killed there has climbed to 1,800, and more than 400,000 people who live in Gaza have now been forced from their homes. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is worsening under a total Israeli siege. There is no electricity, no food, fuel, and medical supplies are in short supply. While talks about opening a humanitarian corridor into Egypt are ongoing, thousands of Palestinian workers from Gaza who normally work in Israel have no idea when they will return home. As Chris Brown reports, many have gathered in cities like Ramallah in the occupied West Bank.
We're in Ramallah on the occupied West Bank, and this is a recreation center, but the people who are here, they're certainly not here for recreation. When the Hamas gunmen stormed into southern Israel and committed their massacres, there were at the time thousands of Gazan workers who were legally in Israel. Most of them were working, but some people were visiting, and there were some people even in Israeli hospitals. And now all of these people are trapped, and this is where hundreds of them literally have been put. This is a recreation center, and as you can see, people are using a basketball apparatus to dry their clothes. They're sleeping on outdoor mattresses. They're trying to exist off donations that people from the West Bank have given them. But it really is a very sorry scene, because a lot of these men, it's all men who are here, they're extremely worried about what they're seeing on television involving their families. We talked to one man who has 9 children. He's barely been able to reach his wife. He says he broke into tears because he's so concerned that they're going to be killed by this relentless bombing campaign. However, at the same time, if you ask them how they feel about what Hamas did, that is not where they direct their anger. They instead bring up the fact that these people, these young men, were living under occupation, and one man described it as a fireball that was released into Israel. But their hope here, their futures here are very dim. The borders are obviously closed. Nothing is coming in or out of Gaza. And so for everyone here, they have no idea when they're going to get home. This is a place without a future. Chris Brown, CBC News in Ramallah.
And we will have much more on the crisis in the Middle East coming up later in the newscast. The long and costly saga over policing in Surrey is not over yet. The city says it is now going to court to try to stop the transition to a municipal force, despite being ordered to make it happen this summer. Yasmin Gandam joins us now with more. Yasmin, what's happening?
Dan, the city of Surrey has now hired lawyer and former RCMP Deputy Commissioner Peter German to help with its legal battle against the move to a city police force. He's filed a petition for a judicial review in BC Supreme Court.
They're very concerned about the cost to Surrey taxpayers if this transition were to continue. And it's also very clear that the Surrey Police Board has been unable to hire enough frontline officers to assume police force of jurisdiction.
Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke has argued the switch to a city police force would cause an unacceptable tax increase in difficult economic times. She campaigned on a promise to keep the RCMP in Surrey. Peter German argues these legal costs are nothing next to taxpayers having to pay for 2 police forces.
Yasmin, this move by the city does have some opponents, particularly on city council.
Yes, at least 4 city councillors who are not with Mayor Locke's party are frustrated by the petition. They say it is a risk to public safety and will cost taxpayers even more. Councillor Linda Annis says this latest move is more about politics than public safety.
Public just wants it done. They just want to move forward. It's been the single focus of council now for the past 5 years, at the expense of many other things, including getting a lot of housing built, improving our roads, transit. We have over 400 portables here, and people want us to be focusing on those issues and would love to see this police transition discussion brought to a conclusion.
Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth is also slamming the petition. In July, the province ordered the City of Surrey to continue the transition to the Surrey Police Service.
My first thoughts are, I find it hard to understand why the City of Surrey would want to waste taxpayers' dollars on fighting a decision that's already been made and is going to be implemented.
Farnworth also says he plans to introduce legislation on Monday to force Surrey to speed up the transition to a city police force. Farnworth says so far the city has not accepted $150 million from the provincial government to help with the process. Dan?
Yasmin Gandam reporting. Thank you. 6 current and former female police officers have now filed a proposed class action lawsuit against BC's municipal police services, alleging gender-based discrimination and harassment.
We need something to be done. We need protection in the workplace. So yeah, the stuff that will come out in this lawsuit, this is the collective experience of women in policing. Now, I'm not saying every woman experiences this, but I'm saying that our stories are not unique.
The 25-page lawsuit names 13 city forces, including Vancouver and Victoria, along with the Office of the Police Complaint Commissioner, the Attorney General, and BC's Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. The women say their complaints were not handled sufficiently in the workplace. They claimed they were ostracized and belittled, and their career advancement became limited.
It affected all of us in our ability to do our jobs and our ability to function in everyday life. We wore it, we carried it home, and we still wear it. We'll wear it forever.
None of these allegations have been proven yet in court. In order for the lawsuit to move forward, a judge would have to certify the class action. The women say if the lawsuit does not go ahead, they will consider filing a complaint with the BC Human Rights Tribunal. 50 years have passed since a military coup in Chile led to widespread violence. It forced many families to flee, and thousands resettled in Canada. Members of BC's Chilean community are now marking that anniversary by acknowledging that there is still a lot more healing to do. Our John Hernandez listened to their stories of survival and finding a new place to call home.
I know, it's emotional.
A small passport photo of her and her sister takes Giselle del Carmen Vivanco Oliva back 50 years. Some good memories back home in Chile.
I had lots of family around, lots of birthday parties.
But also tragic ones.
I remember my cousin who went missing. I remember the last time I saw him walking out the door because he was hiding. I knew something was not right.
Tragedies far too common after September 11th, 1973, when the Chilean government was overthrown by the military, the elected president replaced by dictator Augusto Pinochet, spurring a campaign of violence against those with leftist associations.
But one thing that is very prominent in my memory is the military coming into the house when my sister Maritza, my sister Yvette, we were sleeping, and them coming upstairs with their face all painted black, looking for weapons and arms. And I remember them beating up my mom, grabbing us and just throwing us from the bed.
Vivanco Oliva's family was among 7,000 Chileans that fled to Canada.
We did experience racism at that time. You're talking the 1970s. We got sent to Alberta.
Now she's a mom living in Burnaby and working to support at-risk women. She admits the weight of an uprooted past can still be heavy.
I feel that my daughter can call Canada home because she's born here, But myself, I still feel like I kind of live in limbo.
We had so many hangout areas here, you know, as little bunch of kids.
For Angelo Maroney, landing in Canada was an adventure. His family settled in this downtown East Side housing complex.
I didn't know how long we were going to stay here, and I trusted my mom and my father fully, so I basically enjoyed it. I enjoyed the discovering of new cultures, discovering new place, new languages.
But he says his parents had a harder transition. His father was targeted and imprisoned before coming to Canada.
The torture scarred him, of course, and his medication was alcohol.
Maroney now works as an addictions counselor in the same neighborhood where he grew up.
I feel blessed and grateful that I'm supporting and working here because it feels like home. And I understand some of the struggles that people here in the downtown East Side, they experience.
My brother, and this is me.
69-year-old Gloria Diaz has raised children and grandchildren since coming to Canada.
I'm happy that I ended up here. That it was difficult, yes, it was difficult because by comparison, my brothers and sisters were assimilated faster than me. I was with my mind in the old country and physically here until one day I said, okay, I have to stop this.
She says she's built a community here, but there's still pain.
It's a lot of mending to do. The justice have come slowly but steady.
And there are still people needing to speak up and speak out and remind us.
It's a time which it's our responsibility for the children of the exile to have a voice, because I don't think we've ever had a voice, right?
50 years passed, thousands dead, and 1,300 still missing, with countless more stories waiting to be heard. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Last week, Metro Vancouver released its homeless count, a startling report that showed a massive rise in the number of people in our region without homes. A large number of them are Indigenous. Our Indigenous Affairs reporter Wamish Hamilton looks into why they're on the streets, what's there to help them, and what isn't.
The 2023 Metro Vancouver homeless count numbers are out. New in the count this year were questions about residential school. 1/3 of those who responded identified as Indigenous. Of them, 64% said they had a history or family connection with residential schools. The schools have been closed for decades, but for many Indigenous people struggling with homelessness in the city, it's like the schools are still open. We're about to meet up with an outreach group that serves bagged lunches in the downtown East Side. Among those they serve are residential school survivors and others who didn't go but still live with its impacts. Charles Morrison vividly remembers his residential school experience. The Haisla First Nation member went to the Alberni Indian Residential School in 1964. He ran away, but to this day, he can't outrun his trauma.
I only went there 1 year, but that 1 year just totally screwed up my whole life, because when I had to run away, from there, and I didn't realize how selfish I was until I got back home again, because my family was on the other side yet, and I was home, and I struggled with that a lot, and I blame myself for abandoning them. So, excuse me. I believe the numbers because I see a lot of myself down here in the people I see, and it's really hard to see. And I know it's part of the residential school. I have a lot of friends down here that have gone to residential school, and their grandkids are even down here now too, living on the streets, and they're generational trauma.
I would be first generation that didn't attend residential school. Both my parents attended residential school, and my stepmom actually attended residential school. Growing up on reserve and seeing that some households were very different from mine, and I remember asking myself or saying to myself, like, where's the love? Because I had a very loving grandparent, I had loving parents within the home, and we were always very well cared for, and I seen some households were very different. As I started to learn more about it and understand the impacts and the dysfunctions that have impacted our communities and our households, that's kind of what brought me to working with the homeless, because I was very fortunate and I'm able to give back something.
You've been an outreach worker down here for a long time.
6 years.
6 years?
Yeah. Majority of the people that I interact with, my clients I have three that are in the area that went to residential school. Many of our clients are intergenerational trauma who were raised by their grandma or their grandparents or their parents who went to residential school.
They're still impacting people who didn't even go. Why do you think that is?
Well, those traumas that the parents and grandparents endured, they brought that home. The uncles, the aunts, they brought that home. And unfortunately carried on those traumas to the kids. And now those kids, unfortunately, some of them end up down here. And they're running from the traumas. And this is something I've always mentioned, that this is why we established the All Nations Outreach Society, is that we want to stop that running. And let them know that it's okay to hurt, but don't die doing so.
My daughter and her son are down here. I came down here to help them survive, and I've been here ever since. I want to move home, but there's no places to live up north for me. I live with my family, but nobody helped. Like, remember that saying, it takes a village to raise a child? It doesn't work. Because, my whole family was kind of abandoned, and when I ran away, nobody in my family helped me. I wouldn't get food, no wood, no nothing. I think we have to heal. Even that's hard, because there's no facilities around that will take in people for residential school.
Stories like this can be upsetting and invite painful feelings and memories. If you or someone you care about is looking for support, you can reach the National Residential School Crisis Line. The number's there, 1-866-925-4419. It operates 24 hours a day and is available for survivors, intergenerational survivors, and their loved ones. The 2023-2024 Hope and Shadows calendar was unveiled yesterday by Megaphone magazine. It's an important fundraiser on the downtown east side that points the camera on a community that is frequently seen only in a negative light. We spoke to those featured and those putting the calendar together about its importance.
We want to show the beauty and the wonderful moments in the downtown east side. The idea of it is to combat the stigma and stereotypes that people often associate with the downtown east side. The negativity, it's scary, it's all of these things that we're used to seeing on the news every day. These beautiful moments, these interactions on the street, or recipes that they do, or plants that they've bought, they have regular lives, and we wanted to show that.
It's nice, My mom's gonna get the calendar. It's gonna be a nice surprise.
It's a picture of me and my son. He loves the old school train, so we were just went on the train, and it took me about 5 or 6 takes to get this picture. I just see my son, and I see so much love in the next generation, and his future, and a brighter life.
Casey Meets Jimmy by Lynn Sawatsky.
It means a lot, because it just this calendar highlights the people of this community. Vancouver isn't Vancouver without the downtown east side. We're they see a lot of negative things, but there's also a lot of positive things that come out of this community. Highlights children, and highlights families that live in this community, play in this community, work in this community. I believe in people down here, and sometimes they don't see it, but I believe in everybody in the downtown east side. We're good people, and we have a lot of love and a lot of heart down here. And I think people don't see that a lot, but we do. We have a lot of love for each other.
They're great photos, aren't they, Darius? Beautiful.
They are. It's a high bar for me to get a calendar these days. People don't use a calendar, but for the photos, I think
That
it would
one's
be
worth
worth
it.
it. Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. One event that should be on your calendar, though, is the eclipse tomorrow. We talked about it yesterday.
Yes.
But pretty similar forecast, but a small sliver of hope that we might actually get to see it. So we have the eclipse happen. Remember, BC is the best place in Canada to watch the eclipse. So around, for us here on the South Coast, close to 80%, 75, 80% of the sun will be blocked out by the moon. So spectacular view. In other parts of BC, the further north you go, the further east you go, you get a little bit less blockage, but still it'll be a great show if the cloud cooperates, because we do have it running along. So from around 7:30 to 10:30-ish, depending on where you are in the province, maybe 11 is when you'll be able to see that eclipse. And then that cloud is clearing up a little bit for parts of the South Island, but for us here on the Lower Mainland, it's not looking too great. If we zoom out to the whole South Coast, the green here are areas where you have a pretty clear view, and red is over 70% cloud coverage, so not great, really not great across all of BC. But further east, where they have not as good an eclipse, they're getting luckier with the weather. So a little bit unfortunate, but a small chance that we will see that cloud break through. And even through the cloud, you should be able to notice when the eclipse is happening, because it should get darker for at least a minute or two there. And you'll if you can't see it, you'll know it's happening.
There you go. And if you decide to look, make sure you put on protection.
Yes, thank you. Eclipse glasses or a pinhole projector.
Very good.
How to make it on cbc.ca.
There it is. Good plug. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks.
Back to housing now. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is in Vancouver today to rally support for his party. He says people are struggling with housing, and a government led by him would take bold action.
I will say to the city of Vancouver and every single municipality, the federal money will depend on homes getting built. I'll require every city in Canada boost home building by 15% per year, or lose federal infrastructure money.
Poilievre is holding a second rally tonight. That's expected to start at about 6:30. New numbers from rentals.ca, meanwhile, are giving us a better sense of how dire BC's housing crisis is. As of this month, Vancouver is the most expensive city in Canada for renters, while Burnaby is a close second. Rentals.ca claims median monthly rent for a one-bedroom in Vancouver is almost $3,000 and almost $4,000 for a two-bedroom. Victoria ranks 12th on the list. To give us more context on to what this means for renters, we're joined live by Melissa Giles, the Managing Director of the BC Rent Bank. Melissa, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
We've long known that renters struggle in BC and Vancouver specifically. Can you explain who is actually renting in these cities right now?
Yeah, the rental population is obviously growing across the province. We know in Vancouver especially, I've heard estimates of nearly 50% of households are now renter households. So we see a dramatic increase in the number of people needing access to housing. For us at BC Rent Bank, in the city of Vancouver last year, over 50% of those people that applied for rent bank assistance were living in a family situation, either a single or two-parented household. Whereas in Burnaby, the much larger population is those that are living alone or having to live in roommate situations.
And we know, for example, Burnaby, very fast-growing city, many high-rises going up, particularly around transit hubs. What does it mean that developing cities are growing perhaps without as great a range of rental opportunities?
Yeah, one of the challenges in the Burnaby area, and I reached out to our rent bank partner there, Purpose Society, this afternoon to have a conversation with them as well. And, it's not about the number of units being built, it's about affordability. And so you do see a number of high rises being built in Burnaby. You see increase in building in other Canadian or BC cities, but the issue is affordability for families and for renters and the ability to be able to stay in these locations.
So to that end, what would you like to see from the rent bank, perhaps from whether federal agencies, we just heard from Pierre Poilievre, or the federal government now, in order to increase the volume of rentals, but also the affordability?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some creativity. I mean, kudos to the city of Burnaby for a lot of the initiatives that they've undertaken in the last couple of years. I mean, we've had a great partnership with them. They, in fact, approached us about wanting to get a rent bank going in the community. And then we partnered with Purpose Society in order to be able to deliver that service. So you see things happening at the municipal level. Recently, the bylaw where developers, if they do evict, are responsible to help renters find another alternative solution. I've heard as well the development of a housing authority within the city, which is going to look at solutions to be able to access either existing rental properties and keep them at the low market rental, or be able to acquire lands to be able to do development, but to do so at a range that's more affordable to people. So I think it's going to be a creative partnership between the municipal, provincial, and federal government. I know at Rent Bank, at the BC Rent Bank, we've been able to use both the provincial dollars as well as municipal dollars. And we've been able to partner with federal programs such as Reaching Home in order to be more of service to renters who are really struggling right now.
Melissa Giles, the Managing Director of the BC Rent Bank, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
In just a short time, Gloria Diaz's life in Chile was thrown into turmoil. A military coup 50 years ago when starting over here in Canada. Her story is next. Thank you to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Food banks and PEI say they are feeding more people than ever before. Some have seen double-digit increases in demand. And as Sheehan Desjardins reports, officials say they don't expect it to slow down anytime soon.
This was filled on Thursday.
Aside from Christmas, last Thursday was the busiest day ever at Southern Kings and Queens Food Bank in Montague. 76 families showed up here. They all needed food.
We've had at least 2 to 3 new clients, every week, sometimes 6 a week. So we're getting up there now too.
It's a similar story across the province. Demand at Southern Kings and Queens Food Bank is up 40%. The Upper Room in Charlottetown says it has 27% more clients. And in Crapo, the South Shore Food Bank is seeing a 30% jump.
For years and years and years, we've had food banks institutionalized in this country. So while they're important for people who are desperate, governments should never think that that is going to somehow mitigate the problem to the point that they don't need to make major policy changes.
The co-founder of the food bank here in Crapo says she's never seen numbers like this before. They recently had to turn 12 people away, sending them to other food banks because of demand.
It kind of made me feel sick, and I cried a little. It is getting worse, slowly and steadily getting worse. And now with winter coming and the cost of heating your home, it's just going to escalate.
The Upper Room in Charlottetown is expecting a busy few months too. The holiday season is getting closer. When money is tight, a family's food budget often takes a hit.
Definitely it's getting worse. In August, we had record numbers, and August is usually a slower month for us. And September, unfortunately, kind of blew August out of the water. So we're really preparing for a busy winter.
Back in Montague, Norma Dingwell is getting ready for the next rush of people. She says all these potatoes could be gone by tomorrow. And while donations have slowed down a bit, everyone is thankful to those stepping up to help. Sheehan Desjardins, CBC News, Montague.
Earlier, we told you how Vancouver's Chilean population is looking back on the 50th anniversary of the military coup in that country. John Hernandez spoke to Gloria Diaz, who eventually fled to Canada. She left a country shattered, with friends and family still behind. Here's some of her memories of that time.
The missiles, for instance, that was the first shock to me. I was few blocks away, so I hear very clearly when the missile struck the building. Never heard anything like that ever before or after. So when I talk about September 11, the first memory is that it was 3 missiles against the building. Very shocking, very scary. The message was very clear. We are now in charge, so you obey. You know, to terrorize the population, and sure enough, they got that. Was not resistant to the coup d'etat. Nobody was organized. Let's say people that were supporting Allende, was no one organized. How? In the first place, you're talking an army, and you're talking the police and the Navy and the Air Force. How could you confront an incredible amount of people with training, big weapons? Impossible. So we went home, but things didn't stop there. For instance, my mom told me that the tanks went by our house, but the streets are very narrow. So for a tank to go through, it felt like it was an earthquake, because everything trembled with the weight of this thing. What's the purpose of that?
Yeah.
My mom and dad flew with my 2 youngest sisters in September 1975. And my brother and I were left behind, because at the time, if you were 18, you have to apply by ourselves. Even though we apply all together, but then the government took the time to interview us and whatever other things, investigate us, I guess, and then we flew a year later. And it was a voila, you got there. And we landed in November 26 in Edmonton, and everything was white. Super cold. So the question is, how are we going to survive here? It's so cold. But sure, we were so happy to be with Mom and Dad again.
The difficult task of helping Canadians out of a besieged war zone. Canada's efforts to get people out of Gaza after this.
Comes from knowing it's the favorite choice when Canada gets together over a beer.
Until now, this type of commercial could only be seen and heard on TV and radio stations in other parts of Canada and in the United States. Newspapers and magazines could carry wine and beer ads, but not local radio and TV. Well, that's all changed today under new legislation, which was in part brought about by the BC Association of Broadcasters.
We're certainly pleased as an industry that this discrimination between newspapers and print media has been eliminated, and the fact that millions of dollars have been going across the border and being back here on television and radio is now being spent in British Columbia.
Here's to all the people who make the music we love. Look out!
The stations are limited to 2 minutes of beer and wine commercials per hour. And until the new regulations have been clearly spelled out, Davis says that the broadcasters will be responsible for making sure that the commercials are run at appropriate times and obey the rules of good taste. The beer and wine commercials will come as something of a gift to those broadcasters who have been pinched by falling revenues.
Whether it's a boom, I would think in a major market such as Vancouver, no. In upcountry markets where you have single station situations, I would say there would be definitely a boom to those particular markets.
It's expected that the breweries and the wineries will pump about $5 million into the local market this year, and part of that will benefit local companies that produce the commercials.
It so happens that Vancouver is one of the best centers literally in North America for a number of the technical requirements that are needed to produce good creative. And we will be using Vancouver studios, and we have used them.
The broadcasters will be required to kick back 15% of their beer and wine advertising profits for educational commercials warning about the dangers of alcohol abuse in this, Canada's thirstiest province. Terry Dolan, CBC News, Vancouver.
As Israel warns civilians in northern Gaza to leave, Ottawa says it is trying to make plans to get Canadians out of the region as well. But as Rafi Boudjikanian shows us, it will depend on the goodwill of both the Egyptian and Israeli governments.
As some Canadians escaping Israel got some respite arriving in Athens.
We just came to visit our grandfather. And yeah, it just suddenly everything collapsed.
Ottawa's focus sharpened on Gaza, with Israel warning more than 1 million civilians in the north they had a day to flee.
We're looking at about 150 individuals total in Gaza right now who have identified themselves as requiring assistance. The majority of these people are Canadians.
But getting them out will be complicated. Word today of a possible 5-hour window on Saturday for Egypt on Gaza's south to open up its border.
We are actively engaging with Egyptian and Israeli authorities to ensure that Canadians, permanent residents, and their family members will be able to leave.
Some of that diplomatic work by Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly in a quick head-to-head with her Israeli counterpart. But Canadian officials don't have any reassurances this safe passage will happen.
The last thing we want is Canadians getting stuck at a border. There are a number of security challenges at all the borders into Gaza. We know that there have been bombs at both borders in the last week.
One challenge is just the ability to speak to those on the ground, including this Canadian family.
There's no internet connection, nothing. We had to take chances to call internationally. I tried, my brother tried, like we kept trying till we got like a network or something to get in touch with them. Just my mom answered, said, we're in Rafah, we're fine, we need to go. That's the last thing we heard from them. Every minute passing without them out, this is a minute that this is a possibility for them to be killed anytime, any second.
The number of people asking for help in Gaza grows by the day. The government says the word to get out may come at the last moment as worry of further military strikes looms ahead. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is pushing ahead on his diplomatic mission. Washington says he is working to prevent a wider conflict in the Middle East. And as Katie Nicholson reports, today's meetings included talks with Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas and Jordan's King Abdullah.
A
Another touchdown in a whirlwind tour of the Middle East to prevent this conflict from spilling over.
Mr. Secretary, how are you?
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visiting Jordan, where he met with Mahmoud Abbas, president of the Palestinian Authority.
Thank you, press.
Abbas seizing the moment to emphasize his complete rejection of Israel's plan to displace nearly 1 million people ahead of an expected ground invasion of northern Gaza, where it believes Hamas is deeply embedded.
Good to see you. Very good to be here.
Then it was onward to Qatar to discuss the difficulties of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza and to reaffirm shared goals.
We're also working intensively together to secure the release of hostages, including American citizens being held by Hamas in Gaza. I'm grateful for the urgency that Qatar is bringing to this effort.
As Blinken departs for Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt, the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on the ground in Israel, there to assess the country's military needs. He expressed unwavering, ironclad solidarity with Israel.
There is never any justification for terrorism. And that's especially true after this rampage by Hamas.
Getting timely and sustained American help for this crisis may prove a challenge. While Blinken and Austin are trying to project strength and stability in the Middle East, in Washington, the House is still in disarray. Last night, the GOP's nominee for Speaker, Steve Scalise, bowed out with no clear frontrunner. Some in Congress frustrated by how this makes the U.S. look on the international stage in a time of crisis.
Any differences we have in this room may seem big in the room, but in the context of China on the march, Russia on the march, terrorism on the march, because they smell weakness in Washington, those differences are infinitesimal.
Crucially, without a speaker and a functioning House, it will be more difficult for the U.S. to pass any kind of meaningful spending bill, not just for Israel, but Ukraine, and soon its own federal government. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Patients who use Harborside Health Centre will soon receive letters letting them know if they will still be patients here. Staff shortages mean many people will be sent elsewhere, some to a clinic in Kensington or other communities. But about 700 will have to switch to virtual care. About a couple of years ago, this building had 3 doctors leave, and now about 2.5 nurse practitioners are on a temporary leave. So the clinic is short on staff. Right now, there's 1 doctor working with about 3 nurse practitioners. Health PEI says it's not possible for them to keep up with the workload.
We needed to take steps to promote the sustainability and of the Harborside Health Centre, and like our providers have been under considerable duress for an extended period of time.
There are other healthcare workers on site, such as registered nurses, LPNs, social workers, and physiotherapists. Health PEI says that team has helped, but more had to be done. Residents say it's concerning there always seems to be some news about shortages.
I'm worried about it because I'm 80 years old, so for me it's pretty serious. I don't have a doctor.
Especially the elderly going without doctors, and they sit in the waiting rooms for hours and hours waiting to see doctors, and you know, it's just it's ridiculous.
Health PEI says these are temporary measures, but the idea is to make sure people are being looked after.
We will ensure that anyone that's impacted by this will continue to receive the care that they need.
Health PEI will send out letters with specific instructions for patients over the next few days. Officials say the situation is expected to improve in a few months because more nurse practitioners will be working here by February. Laura Meter, CBC News, Summerside.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Darius Madavi is back to paint us a weekend forecast. What do we need in terms of umbrellas, Gore-Tex, that kind of thing?
Definitely, if you're out at night, make sure you have it. If you're on the west coast of the island, you'll need it there too.
Okay.
For those of us on the lower mainland and up the east coast of the island, for the most part, the rain comes at night, so it shouldn't be too bad. But that rain has already started streaming in across the island, so that's begun this evening. It's going to continue over the next few days as well. So we see that first bit of the system start to move in, and by late tonight, we're getting some pretty heavy rain across much of the south coast. That moves out, so by late morning, this is eclipse time, most of the rain has cleared up, but we're still seeing quite a bit of cloud. Later in the day, the rain clears up as well. And then we see, for the most part, clearer in the lower mainland in the afternoon, just the island getting that second burst of the system. That system rolls through, and we get more of it overnight until Sunday. And then as we get later in the day Sunday, for the most part, we're clear. We even get some breaks in the cloud across parts of the lower mainland, so that'll be a nice break as well. And then it's really Sunday night, we see a really major system come in that'll be dumping quite a lot of rain. So by the end of the sort of 72-hour period, we're talking a lot of precipitation. So if we take a look here, you can see that precipitation build up over the 48 hours. And then as we get into Sunday night into Monday, we get even more as well, but this model won't show it. So you can see quite a bit of accumulation across the south coast and BC as well. But again, not nearly as much of that rain making its way into the interior. Maybe a couple scattered showers in the south coast tomorrow and maybe Sunday, but really it's the coast that's getting this system. It's not until early next week we might see some of that push its way into the interior, but quite a rainy forecast ahead, as you can see. So enjoy the little breaks of sun when they come this weekend.
Okay. Now, we should mention it is Fun Fact Friday, and no, there are no ghosts behind you this time.
That's good.
So good check. What can you share with us this week?
I had to check because you could have put ghosts there.
Darn
Today we're
right.
talking about frogs. So this is sort of a fun fact in a science story in one. This study just came out this week looking at European common frogs. You can see them here. This is what we call a mating ball, which is quite among many amphibians and reptiles. There's one female frog, and in some amphibian species and frogs, the females are very in demand because there's many more males than females, so they sort of get piled on, but they don't like it very much because they can suffocate. It's not great for the frog. So females of the European common frog species have developed and evolved ways to avoid being harmed by the behavior. And so when you have a mating ball form, they will either imitate the sound of a male, because male frogs
throw them off the scent.
These species, exactly, yeah. They will jump on anything. Other frog species, toads, salamanders even have been observed.
Yep.
So by mimicking the sound of a male frog, makes them hop away, or even playing dead is the other big one that they do. So yeah, not great to be a female European common frog. I wouldn't recommend that, but
hard to make a recommendation like that, but there you go.
Exactly. Playing dead's usually to avoid predators, not
clearly smarter
partners.
than the men.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nicely done, Darius. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Have a good weekend.
You too. His name is Bikini, and he's a big part of a palliative care team in Montreal. The work of this four-legged friend, right after this.
Swear I hear angels sing every time you're touching me. Something about your brown skin. You stand so mighty, stand so tall, like you could fix all wrong. You're where I belong. Your love brings me so high, feeling for you say goodbye. Lay down your crimes, tell me a secret. You know got your back in your boy. Locked and loaded, ready to go. I got your back in your loving the taste of your kiss. Corona with a hint of lime. You know I'm on that top shelf. Lay down your crimes. Tell me a secret. You know got your back in your boy. Locked and loaded, ready to go. I got your back in your boy. I'm locked and loaded, ready to go. I got your back in your boy. I'm locked and loaded, ready to go. I got your back in your boy. I got your back in your boy. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
The Chutzpah Festival returns November 2nd to 23rd with an exciting lineup of performances, including dance, music, theater, and more. For tickets, visit chutzpahfestival.com and join CBC Vancouver's Leanne Young at the Alumni UBC Achievement Awards November 14th. The event honors members of the UBC community through their endeavors and commitment to help shape a better world.
A palliative care home in Montreal has welcomed its newest member, a 2-year-old Labradorese named Bikini, who's also trained as a service dog. The CBC's Valeria Corey-Minocchio met the center's furry new friend.
Allô, Monsieur Larry.
Bonjour. Allô, Bikini. Allô, Bikini.
This is Bikini. She's a 2-year-old Labradorese who's super calm and even a bit lazy sometimes. But that's what makes her the perfect fit here at Maison Saint-Raphaël.
She makes this feel more like home. I think she helps people to feel that life is a bit more normal again.
I've always loved dogs. Dogs are wonderful. They sense it. They know what we're all about.
Bikini is provided by the Mira Foundation, which helps train assistance dogs. Dr. Lawler is her handler and takes care of her at the palliative care facility and at home. Bikini is by her side when she sees patients if they want her there.
And it's amazing just to see the difference in the energy in the room. When I walk in alone as the doctor versus when I walk in with her, there's such a difference in the connection that it allows me to make.
Bikini doesn't just help patients and their loved ones feel more comfortable. She's also a source of support for the staff here.
And they too will come and just sit with her and pet her and get a little break and get centered and grounded and then be able to go back to the work.
She'll be by patients' sides here for at least the next 5 years, creating deeper bonds with them and being a bright spot in their day. Valeria Corey-Minocchio, CBC News, Montreal.
Good dog. Thanks for joining us on CBC Vancouver News at 6 this week. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as our website, cbc.ca/BC, and on our CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Michelle Gassoub will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night. Enjoy the weekend. Please stay safe.